Maratan looked up at the faceless Juracrete statues that stood, almost like guards in front of her new school. For lack of a better word, they all wore a thick sheet of orange plastic in the shape of a baggy jumpsuit. There were roughly 20 of them, the road to the front doors diverted around their pedestal in a roundabout. She could feel something strange as she looked at them, a sense of something, perhaps an emotion, or maybe even a memory. But it was faint, intangible, and yet stronger than iron. She extended a small clawed hand and took the closest statue's open hand. She could feel where it had worn down slightly from years of many doing the same. What surprised her was the warmth, like the stone was alive. The calluses expertly worked into the hands by the masons seemed to have warmed with the Juracrete, never going smooth. For a long moment she stood there, gazing up at the featureless smooth face of the broad-shouldered statue. She felt safe standing so close to them. Rationally, she knew it was just stone, perhaps warmed by an internal system or the sun. But still, she felt that if anyone were to try and attack the school, these statues, these men of stone, would not let it happen. The sound of the first bell jolted her out of her thoughts. Snatching up the bag for her datapad, she bolted for the front doors of the school, leaving the statues to continue their silent watch. The day passing by like every other school day. That was until her lunch period, when they were allowed to roam the campus and surrounding areas. She was just going to eat her lunch alone on the curb and read like she had at her old school. But the sight of an elderly human woman laying flowers at the feet of the statues got her attention. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she slowly approached, quietly watching as the old woman laid a different flower at the feet of each statue. She recognized the green stalks and fuzzy heads of dandelions, and the soft, dense pink flowers of milkweed, but she didn't recognize the soft, fuzzy white flowers, or the ones with spider-like blooms. "Do you have a question, child?" The old woman's creaky voice made Maratan jump a little bit, but as the woman craned her head back to look at the young Gegnosian, Maratan recognized a smile. "Why are you laying flowers at their feet? Are they heroes?" The old woman's face softened into sadness, gently laying the final flower at the feet of the first statue. "They always hated that word. Hero. No, they were simply men. Men who made choices both good and bad. Men who lived on the wrong side of the law, but when trouble came knocking, showed the world their true colors." Maratan looked up at the statues again, finally taking a seat beside the woman. "Then, why do they have statues?" The woman smiled grimly, wiping her eyes on the soft black cloth of her dress. Brushing away some fallen leaves, she revealed a brass plaque mounted into the Juracrete pedestal. "Dedicated to the convicts of Tarvis State Penitentiary, in honor of their ultimate sacrifice." Maratan read the words with a sinking feeling in her chest. She knew what the plaque meant, and yet it left her baffled. "Why? What happened?" The old woman smiled sadly at the plaque. "Almost 100 years ago, during the War of Many Names, the unified Gegnosian Empire began to militantly expand its galactic borders. Tarvisnia, this planet, was one of the first to fall after the United Terran Army lines were shattered. These men, these convicts, criminals, scum, stood here in this exact spot and denied an entire battalion of Gegnosian stormtroopers a single step past them. A single step towards the very school you still learn in today. Looking at the area now, you must wonder how, but this place did not look the same back then. It was a bustling metropolis. Buildings lined the streets so tightly one could only see the sky in a narrow strip over their heads." The little Gegnosian girl looked up at the statues again, trying to imagine the scene, but looking at the small suburban neighborhood, she found herself unable. She could only ask, "Why?" The old woman sighed softly. "I've been asking myself the same question since I was your age. I still don't know the answer." Maratan nodded quietly, softly saying, "It feels Almost like they're still here. Another slow nod from the old woman, and a proud smile. That's because they never left. Their bodies were buried beneath the rubble of the buildings that once stood here, and whether by some twist of fate or some deity honoring their sacrifice, the school remained as it was, untouched. The children inside were able to be evacuated when Top Hat agents infiltrated the planet. I remember it almost like it was yesterday. Maratan found herself saddened as the old woman gazed quietly at the plaque. The lunch bell rang and Maratan had to excuse herself, sprinting back inside so she wasn't late. The old woman remained there a while before slowly getting to her feet and tottering away. Connor O'Reilly gently knelt, picking up a ghostly afterimage of the dandelion laid at the feet of his statue. He smiled at it softly, before softly blowing the seed pods away, a gust of wind doing the same to the real flower. Sitting down, he pulled a thin, hand-rolled cigarette from the front breast pocket of his jumpsuit. Lighting it with a battery, a cut gum wrapper, and a tissue, he took a long, deep pull. Glancing over his shoulder at two of his fellow convicts playing ping-pong on the old rec room table, he offered the cigarette up. One wordlessly caught the ball and meandered over, taking a drag before sitting beside Connor. It only took a moment before all 20 had gathered, quietly passing the cigarette around. The quiet cracking of jokes and hushed arguments were a common occurrence. Eventually, a small black doorway appeared in the street, and a young man in a tattered black robe strolled through, pushing a cart laden with liquor, tobacco, porno mags, and every narcotic under the sun. Death smiled as he handed Connor the clipboard to sign off that everything was there. Taking it, Connor signed the line and slid it back to Death. See you in 10 years, bonehead. He joked as Death's clipboard puffed into black smoke. Very well. I take it your chosen afterlife has been pleasant? Connor smiled softly and nodded, gently looking at his hand. The children laugh, play, they're happy. It is a privilege to know our efforts weren't in vain. Death nodded softly, glancing over at the statues. I feel sorry for any that might interrupt it. You guys were far less terrifying with faces. Connor laughed a deep belly laugh, glancing back as well while the others unloaded the cart. I don't. We may be monsters, but at least we have a code. Nodding, Death quietly patted Connor on the shoulder. You know no one remembers you all like that. A soft shake of his head accompanied Connor's sad laugh. Only you know how many innocent lives we sent to you before this. We still have a lot to atone for. One good deed doesn't erase all the evil we've done, but it was a good first step. That it was. Death quietly agreed, before turning to quietly walk back through the dark doorway. Picking up a baggie of tobacco and some rolling papers, Connor sat on the ground watching the school's main doorway as he rolled fresh cigarettes, content to stay invisible and unacknowledged by the children inside. But if anyone tried to hurt them, well, they wouldn't live long enough to regret that decision.